Arkansas coming off a big win against Georgia Southern to no surprise 45-10. So they enter this matchup, I got to think, for the first time in forever at 3-0 against Texas A&M. And like I said off the top, my memory of this particular matchup is Texas A&M coming in with much better teams, but Arkansas typically puts up a pretty good fight.
Yeah, they're usually I was trying to look the last time these two teams were ranked when they played, and it was 2016. Arkansas was 17th, I believe. Yeah, and A&M was 10th. I had that written down. I don't know why I need to look at my book here or my media guide. It's usually it doesn't matter what the records are. It doesn't matter who looks better on the stat sheet in this game. It's so bizarre. And then there's just some years where it's like A&M is just clearly the better team. I mean, I don't think that's always the case, but probably most of the time they've been the better program since joining the SEC and since the debacle of Bobby Petrino in 2012. Ever since then, it's just been, if they lose this year, it's 10 straight losses to A&M. I never thought that would ever happen. And here we are. And I'm not trying to diss A&M, but it's like Arkansas, even in the Bielema years, were pretty competitive. They had some years where they were absolutely ranked. They deserved to be somewhere in the top 20 and top 15, and it just didn't matter. When Arkansas plays A&M, all that stuff goes out the window, and that's why, I got to do my breakdown on Friday. I'm going to give my score and everything on Friday, and I already know where I'm going to go with it. It's like everything we just talked about, everything we've talked about all week. I was on Mark Rogers' show on Tuesday doing the recording. Throw it all out the window because it just feels like it's going to be something else once these guys, strap on the helmets and get on the field.
You're really selling our video well, Ty. Let people know everything I'm about to say. You can pretty much discard here.
Look, there's definitely there's evidence here. I mean, there's things that we can look at, body of work and what have you. There are some things I like about on my show. I didn't tell you here, but on my show, I did pick Arkansas to win that one, but I thought it would be close. I said there were three scenarios. It's either going to be Texas by close, Arkansas by a little, or Texas by a lot. And it ended up being the one scenario that I didn't think would happen. It was Arkansas kicking the living crap out of the Longhorns. I don't know, Mark. I think it had something to do with me doing the horns down here and on my live show. I don't know. I'm just saying. I think I probably had something to do with that, so I want to take that credit at least. But I know that chat was fired up. They kind of thought that Arkansas didn't belong on the same field as the Longhorns, and it turned out to be the other way around. And I think A&M fans kind of have that same feeling. But because of what happened against Texas, I think they're a little bit more cautious. But they feel like A&M for sure. Yeah, they've got this 9 straight years. They're about to make it 10. So we'll see.
I would hope that they're expecting a good game because that 2016 matchup that you just referenced, that the last time they were both ranked in the top 25, was a pretty solid Texas A&M win. But everything since then, despite Arkansas being, of course, horribly down during Chad Morris's stay, are all one-score games with pretty inferior Arkansas teams on the field. And now Arkansas is bringing a much better product to the field. And I got to tell you that this is the game that's coming to mind for me that I got to see on Saturday.
I can't for the life of me. And I know A&M fans have to agree with this. I cannot understand. And it's cool that it's on CBS. It's a big game there. I get it. But no game day. Okay, I get it. They want to go to, I think they've got Notre Dame this week. No SEC network. This is probably in conference play to start out. This is one of the biggest games of the year. Who would have thought that coming into the season? Now I had Arkansas coming into this game at 3-0, and I had A&M at 3-0 coming in here, and but I didn't. I guess that beating the living crap out of Texas has added a little bit more of some hype behind this game. I guess wow, they just absolutely destroyed Texas. Maybe Arkansas is really legit, or maybe Texas is just overrated. But then they looked really good against Rice. So yeah, this is probably one of the most, this is a big game. And I'm a little surprised that it's only not dissing CBS because that's a big, that's a good time slot. It's their game, right? But a little bit surprised that it's not being at least like the SEC network's not there. I was a little surprised by that. So, but someone brought up in my live show on Monday, they said, well, maybe it has something to do with them not being on campus. So that could be the case. But no, I think everyone's aware, and I'm not trying to make it sound like woe is Arkansas, woe is us, or A&M. It's just I really thought that one of those two would be at this game because this is a big game.
Well, in terms of College Game Day's decision to go to Notre Dame, Wisconsin, it's being played at Soldier Field. It has a little bit more of a unique aspect because of that, and also those teams don't play annually versus this being an annual game. And then the SEC network is
Kentucky, South Carolina. Kentucky, South Carolina.
Yeah, there's no comparison between the two games in any such way.
That's right. Like I said, I get game day. I get that. I want to watch that game. I want to watch Notre Dame, Wisconsin. But Kentucky, South Carolina, like nobody else. Hell, South Carolina, they don't care about this game. No one in that state cares about this game. I get it. Kentucky's riding, a lot of momentum. I think their quarterback, their passing game, a little bit overplayed and overstated. Oh, he's great. And then you kind of saw what happened last week. Not saying he's bad. Just think that Kentucky might be in the quarterback played simply because they've added that all of a sudden they're world beaters. I do think Kentucky, they look way better this year. Good job over there with Stoops and everything. But Kentucky, come on, Kentucky, South Carolina, let's get real. Arkansas and A&M is where it's at this week for sure.
Well, Ty, I'm going to make one more attempt to bail out the SEC network. I'm sure that they look at the entirety of the schedule and think, okay, we need to get to Vanderbilt. We need to get to South Carolina. They try to get everywhere at least once and probably saw this as the opportunity to do so.
You're doing a little devil's advocate there, aren't you? That's what you're doing.
That's what I get paid to do.
I hear you. I agree. I know they got to get around the map, and they are the SEC network. They got to cover everybody. But yeah, this is going to be. I'm excited. I'm probably more excited for this than I am the Longhorn game, only because it's an opportunity that's also like the Texas game within grasp, but it's a chance to break this just stupid winning record that A&M has on Arkansas. It's time to put that to bed. I think there are years where Arkansas was better. They still found a way to lose again because you just throw everything out the window. This game is just it's just kind of nuts how that always seems to be the case. And Arkansas, in my opinion, I know we're going to break that down in a minute, but I think Arkansas looks to me like the better team here when you consider who they've played and how A&M has struggled against some teams. It just makes no sense. I just feel like Arkansas is the better team. I know I'm going to get called biased for that, but I've watched plenty of A&M this year, and obviously Arkansas to say I think that Arkansas, they passed the eye test in terms of, comparing these two teams.
Yes, and that's one of the reasons I've got Arkansas 7th in my rankings and Texas A&M at 14th, while the national traditional polls have it just basically reversed. I think Arkansas is 16th, A&M's whatever they are, 6th or 7th, something in that range, because Texas A&M came into the season with the expectations. Arkansas did not. But what we've seen on the field is that Arkansas has taken on the best team of the 6 games between the two teams, and that would be Texas, and they steamrolled Texas, physically beat them up, led that game 33-7 at one point. Just it was not a game. They just were clearly the better team. Texas A&M played one Power 5 team, and they went to Denver and struggled, escaped against a Colorado team that turned around and couldn't even score against Minnesota last week. So I know that I'm playing one of those, A plus B equals C games, but it is relevant to a certain extent. Zach Calzada is now the quarterback at Texas A&M, and he struggled against Colorado, the only Power 5 team that they've played. So Texas A&M's not playing as good a football as Arkansas right now. Of course, that could change on Saturday.
Yeah, and watching Calzada, you're talking about a guy that's throwing 51% on the year. Not very good numbers, and I've had people try to convince me that numbers don't matter, and I'm like, okay, well, you're gonna have to explain this to me, because A&M on offense so far, they look exactly what the stat sheet says they are, and Calzada 37 of 72, 458 yards, 51% completion ratio, 4 touchdowns, 2 picks. Their offensive line has looked shaky, and they've given up through 3 games. Again, you just talked about who they played a little bit. They've given up 6 sacks on the year. They've got 5 picks. I don't know I think they had at least a fumble. I'm not sure, but A&M looks rough on offense, and the numbers represent that. They don't look very great. Again, I know what I said. You're going to have to throw all this out the window, but it is something to say that I think Arkansas on paper clearly looks like the better team when you talk about comparing them on offense. I mean, Arkansas, 41 points a game, and that's after playing Texas. I get they struggled against Rice in the first half. They didn't play a strong 4 quarters against Georgia Southern. I get that, but okay, majority of the play throughout all the 12 quarters that they've played, they've looked impressive on offense. 41 points per game to Texas A&M's 28. Points allowed. I think A&M's numbers are a little bit, they're at sub 6 points per game, which is incredible. Going to give them all the props in the world, but Arkansas's at 16 per game. Total yards, Arkansas's just south of 500 yards total offense, and A&M is at 437. So, and then again, you go back to the eye test. There's just not a lot there that I look at and go, oh, well, yeah, no, they're great. Now they're supposed to have a world beater of a tight end in Jalen Wademeyer, who is the leading receiver for them, 12 catches, 141 yards, but no touchdowns for him on the year. And I think Aeneas Smith for them is out, if I'm not mistaken. Now, I haven't gotten an update on that, and I'm not done doing my complete A&M breakdown through the week, but I'm pretty sure he went out in the last game with an injury. And he's someone that they planned on leaning on this year, and he may not be available for Arkansas. On Arkansas side, there are some doubts about a couple of players. Ricky Stromberg, who's an all-conference caliber. I think he's somewhere around, I don't know, I'm not going to say draft pick where he's at, but he's definitely a draft pick this year for somebody. He may not be available. We don't have 100%. I don't know what's going on with him. And then Dalton Wagner, starting right tackle. I think he's kind of day to day. So there's going to be some guys that may not take the field against Texas A&M. The same for A&M against Arkansas. But yeah, I think when you go back to looking at the numbers on the sheets and looking at the eye test, just Arkansas just clearly looks like the better team coming into this game. Like you said, you've got them in your top 8. I don't have my own top 25. I like the way that you've done it. Like you and I were talking about before we started recording, you caught a lot of crap for that. But I think at the same time, you could throw that much, if not more, crap at the AP top 25 and the way they have things, because I have no idea how anyone thinks A&M is a top 8 team. I have no idea how anyone thinks that they belong in the top 10. And maybe this week they'll be brought down to reality a little bit.
Texas A&M came into the season, for me, being a more consistent or more known factor for me. I knew what I had with Texas A&M, I thought, to a larger degree than Arkansas. I
for sure
pretty much had Texas A&M pegged as a 10-2 team. And with one of the top roughly 5 defenses in the country, with exceptional playmakers led by Isaiah Spiller. You mentioned Aeneas Smith, who may not be able to suit up against Arkansas. Devin Akane, Jalen Wydemeyer, as you mentioned, one of the best tight ends in college football. So my 2 questions about Texas A&M entering the season were offensive line. They bring back one of the best linemen in the nation in Kenyon Green, but they had to move him from guard to tackle, and they've got 4 new starters, and they've not performed that well in the one Power 5 matchup against Colorado. And then, of course, the quarterback situation that went down to the final week of August camp between Zach Calzada and Haynes King. King's the more athletic guy. Calzada's got the big arm. They went with King. He was the big 5-star or near 5-star prospect coming out of high school. He gets hurt against Colorado. And as you mentioned, Calzada has not been up to the challenge, very sharp yet. And so we've got offensive line and quarterback issues for Texas A&M. I think everything else is rock solid, spectacular. Arkansas, if you would have told me before the season started that Arkansas was going to go 8-4, I would have said, okay. If you would have said they were going to go 5-7, I would have said, okay. So they were more of I needed more data, more display from Arkansas, and I got that against Texas to a certain extent. I still believe that Texas is a top 25 type team in that range, and Arkansas manhandled them up front. That was the most impressive aspect of that game to me, that they could run the ball at will, and they stopped Bijan Robinson or contained him very effectively. That was impressive. So Arkansas's had the one test, not that that proves everything, but they played big boy football one time. Texas A&M played a semi-big boy football, depending on what your thoughts and feelings are about the Pac-12, which I believe it's definitely distinguished itself as the worst conference in college football this year, despite what Oregon's doing. And so Texas A&M, you can have off days, but they really had a clunker at Colorado. They came that close to losing as a 17-point favorite.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I'm like that with A&M now, like how you said about Arkansas coming into the year. I did have them at 8-4, still do. This game's going to tell us a lot, even though we're throwing out everything when they play, when they get on the field. But I'm that way with A&M right now. Like, I need more data. I need to see more, and this is probably going to be, again, this is going to be very telling for both sides. And I could sit here and flap my gums about how great, again, 41 points a game. Arkansas hasn't done that in their first 3 games. I don't know. It's been a minute. It's been a minute. No matter who those first 3 opponents were, and Arkansas has at least played Texas. And like you and I, when we were talking before we started recording, I said I'm just not a fan of even top 25 polls until after week 4 for this very reason, because it is pretty challenging to sit here and say, well, is Texas for sure a top 8 team? Are they really a top 10 caliber team? And I don't think so. But who knows? They could come out and just punch Arkansas in the mouth, and nothing's going to shock me in this game. By the way, the ESPN Football Power Index has them favored at 57%, and obviously Arkansas at the remaining 42.6. And it's like, I get that. I get it. I think even the FPI is like, I don't know. Like, you don't typically see them two opponents like this, especially when you consider Arkansas coming into the year on the FPI. I think they were picked 4 wins or 3 wins or something. 4, I think it's 4, and now it's adjusted, I think, to 7. So this week will have a pretty big impact, I think, on both these teams, and it'll allow someone to either go back to the drawing board and figure out what they need to do and correct the mistakes, and someone else is going to be able to build off the win. So that's what's going to be. That's something that's worth looking at when we get ready. When Arkansas now, after that, they continue into the gauntlet with the rest of the schedule, which is just going to be so challenging. But this is an opportunity for both these teams, and I don't think either one of them are overlooking this. I think Jimbo's very, very well aware of the performance or the lack of performance he's had from his offense. I will say, I've bragged on their defense quite a bit throughout, even going into the fall camp or coming out of fall camp, and going through the weeks, and getting ready for them. And I said this Saturday in the postgame show, and I said it again on Monday. I'm pretty impressed. Their front 7, they fly to the ball pretty well. They have given up some rushing yards, like 160, I think, per game, and Arkansas is at about 120, 125, somewhere in there. But they do flock to the ball pretty good. It looks like their run defense is getting better. Their pass defense is legit, and at least from what I could tell, that's an area where it's the most interesting to draw out. Like, wow, okay, their secondary, they react to the ball really, really quick and really fast, and they're definitely stockpiling talent in that part of the field. So if they're able, if we're talking about keys to the game here, if they're able to stop KJ and that plethora of running backs that Arkansas has, if they're able to at least contain it and force KJ to beat them with his arm, and that's going to be everybody's key week in and week out when they play Arkansas, because make no mistake about it, Arkansas, really what they are is they're a power run offense. That's what this is. It's the veer and shoot. It's meant to run effectively and to open things up so you can throw the ball a little bit, but it's meant to run the ball. And if A&M can contain it and force KJ to throw, and Arkansas does what they've done on defense all year, if these things happen, I think it's going to be low scoring, and it's going to be again, it's going to be interesting to watch because you don't see that kind of football anymore. You don't see sub 20-point games. It's just not as common these days, and that could be what takes place on the field.
Talking Hogs and Texas A&M with Ty Hudson from Pig Trail Network. We get a lot of great feedback when Ty comes on, so you know what you need to do. Head on over to Pig Trail Network. Check out his work on a more consistent basis. Also, share these videos out on social media because not everyone knows that we're here talking college football every day here at the Voice of College Football. You mentioned KJ Jefferson, and I'll make one disclaimer before I move on the discussion about the quarterback, and that's I am citing that I do not believe that Texas A&M has played top 10 football as of yet through 3 weeks. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are not a top 10 football team. We have yet to see that. In my opinion, we have yet to see that.
Yeah.
KJ Jefferson, to your point about Calzada completing 51% of his passes, here's a guy that has been a sub 50% completion guy, but now he's receiving more consistent playing time. Of course, he's the guy, and maybe that has helped him in addition to his own work and development of him as a quarterback, just flat out being able to play. Now, is he carving up defenses like he's Peyton Manning? No, but he's at 62%, coming off a 13 for 23 day against Georgia State. So your thoughts about KJ Jefferson, because you just mentioned we saw him running wild in the secondary against Texas and complementing the rest of that running game. And that's exactly what Texas A&M is going to force him to do rather than or going to force him to throw the ball because they do not want the sight of KJ Jefferson running loose in the secondary.
Got to credit Kendall Briles for sure. And I think a lot of credit goes to Felipe Franks. Felipe Franks and KJ talked about this a little bit. It did a lot for him. For Felipe Franks to come in and kind of took on that role, KJ said he learned a lot from Felipe Franks. Now, Felipe Franks is not a first-round quarterback. He made the 53-man down in Atlanta. I think he's still somewhere on their roster as far as I know. A lot of credit to Kendall Briles and to Felipe Franks. And I think Kendall's done a really good job of understanding KJ's strengths and understanding what he has to work with the entire offense. And what's interesting is he's putting up these numbers. Meanwhile, Treylon Burks, he's not blowing up like we thought he would. I figured by now he'd 25 catches, I don't know, several hundred yards receiving, 4 or 5 touchdowns. He's not. I mean, he's a piece of the offense. There's no doubt they'll use him in motion. You'll see him line up in motion. He'll kind of dance around behind KJ and then move back around. They're definitely using him as a chess piece, trying to identify the defense and what kind of coverage they're in. But KJ, he's I don't know that his passing has improved as much as it's just, again, Kendall getting guys in position to make plays and to help him out, right? Like you had that long catch by Treylon Burks against Georgia Southern last week. You could see I think he's got legit high 4.3, low 4.4 speed. Treylon Burks does. You see him just take off, and just all of a sudden now KJ ends this game up with 330 plus yards through the air. But at the same time, KJ to me looks more confident. And I saw that in the spring. I saw that in both the scrimmages I was able to make. I went to the second scrimmage. I went to the final red-white scrimmage that was on SEC Network. And then I went back and watched it again. And the more I watched, the more you could just see KJ has more confidence in his ability to operate within the offense. He does not stutter step. Now, he did, I think, once against Georgia Southern, and you could see it. Like he kind of hesitated to take off and run. But it's pretty well known now that he is very dangerous with his feet. Strong arm. He does not deliver accurate throws. He gets throws just within the area where a receiver can make a play on the ball and where the corner can't or the defensive back can't. He overthrows targets. He does. We also have to remember these receivers throughout the year so far. I've counted, what am I at, about 6 drops on the year so far, and that's ridiculous. I mean, that you shouldn't be anywhere near that, and that's where they're at. They're at 6. It might even be more. And a friend of mine who watches every game 3 times says he's counted about 8. But so you take away half those, he's 65+% pass completion, maybe closer to 70%. So he's getting the ball in position where a receiver can make a play on it. And whether that means, you go back to, Traylon Burks, who's kind of had to make those hard slant receptions, or Tyson Morris. There's been a couple of times where KJ's thrown to him downfield, and he put the ball where only Morris could turn around and actually dive forward and make a play on the ball, because KJ, I think he had an understanding of the timing where the receiver was at and where the defensive back was at on the field, and he did a good job of delivering a catchable ball. So I think he's got a lot of confidence, and also he might have as good of a deep ball as Felipe Franks did for Arkansas last year. We're not seeing as many vert routes. We're not seeing as many. They're not stretching the field out as much as they were a year ago. I think really this is what the offense is meant to be. Last year, Felipe Franks, he's not a runner like KJ. He did have a long run in preseason football in the NFL. I get that. I've heard people tell me that, but he wasn't designed for this offense, yet Kendall Browse was able to make it work. Now you have a quarterback. It's no longer square peg, round hole, right? Like I thought kind of Felipe Franks was last year in the veer and shoot. This year, it's like you've got the guy. And again, it's all kind of coming together. I want the passing game. I'd really like to see them get it going this week, but that's going to be really, really hard. You got to give A&M a lot of credit. Even though they haven't played anybody, their secondary has passed the eye test for me. And really their whole defense has, for the most part. Their run defense has been questionable. But KJ could have a pretty big week this weekend, and that's just going to do a lot for his confidence. And it's a big game for both teams, but I think it's even more important to the Razorbacks.
Yeah, Texas A&M only lost 2 starters from what was a top 5 defense in the country last year. Damani Richardson's one of the best at his positions. Aaron Hansford at linebacker, just a tremendous collection of talent from top 5 to 10 recruiting classes over the last few years from Jimbo Fisher. I guess my last question to you, flipping to the Arkansas defense versus the Texas A&M offense, would be, again, if Calzada gets his game together and throws the ball reasonably well and the offensive line maybe performs better than it has, I think A&M is really difficult with Isaiah Spiller, one of the best at his positions, Jalen Weidemeyer, one of the best at his positions, and guys, again, we mentioned Aeneas Smith and him being questionable, but Devin Akane, Chase Lane, these guys are all their guys that they line up in the backfield. They line up as slot receivers. They're all over the place, and Jimbo Fisher is very adept at scheming and matchups, and he's recruited a ton of guys that are just slippery in the secondary, and Arkansas is going to have their tackling shoes on.
Shouldn't be a problem. I mean, it shouldn't. They have arguably, I think, their starting linebackers, the guys they like to rotate, Bumper Pool, Grant Morgan, and Hayden Henry, might be 3 of the top 6, top 8 linebackers in the SEC. They have all 3 of those guys are in the top 10 in total tackles on the year. Grant Morgan, who's got a sack, Bumper's got at least a couple of quarterback hurries. If that's a strength, that's it. That's their strength. They tackle. They don't miss very many tackles. Now, Bumper Pool, I've caught a little bit of heat because I said, look, he misses tackles in the backfield. He just does. Not all the time, but he's not the most consistent. I think he kind of over pursues in the backfield just a little bit. If I'm being a little bit critical, that would be it. But other than that, no, I feel pretty confident if they continue like they've done through these 3 games, and like we saw in the first 5 games last year until injuries and COVID and everything kind of caught up to them, and the lack of spring camp where they couldn't develop the back end of their depth chart. You had that this year. You didn't have those interruptions. I feel a lot more confident they're going to be able to hang on. And defensively, as long as they do what they've done again these past 3 weeks. Now, look, Jimbo Fisher, you cannot count him out. We know what he can do on offense, and he can find a weakness and do what he needs to do, right, to get the offense going. And he's definitely got some playmakers. Their skill position guys are 4 stars, highly rated players, 4 and 5 stars. These are guys that had a lot of offers to play big time football, and some of them chose to stay home and play for the Aggies. But I feel like, again, based on what we've seen through these 6 games between Arkansas and A&M, Arkansas's 3 games against a far better opponent than anybody A&M has played in Texas. tackling was not an issue. And like you said, they have probably one of the top backs. I don't even think just in the Big 12. Robinson could be one of the top backs in the country before it's all said and done, especially cutting up those sorry Big 12 defenses. Oh, not supposed to say that. Sorry. But no, I think I don't think tackling is going to be an issue for them. And Jalen Catalon, who I didn't even mention, is one of the top tacklers in the SEC. I think he's somewhere in the top 5. And then Joseph Fouché, who's in the top 10 as well. I think they ended up with like half the top 10 tacklers are on this Arkansas defense. Some people will say, well, they're on the field too much. Well, not really. They've actually had quite a few 3-and-outs. I think it's more that the offense is scoring quicker and they're getting up and down the field more often. But yeah, I mean, one way or another, they are on the field a little bit more, but they're there making the plays. They're there when they need to be there. They fill the gaps. They don't give up big plays. They've given up one big play all year, and it just happened last week. The Georgia Southern quarterback came in who they had no film on. Guy came in and he saw a breakdown of the defense. He took off for a whole bunch of yards. I think it was 60 or 70 yards, but okay, that's one play through how many quarters? Through 12 quarters that they've given up of that amount of yardage. So they're very disciplined. It is Odom coaching these guys after all. Maybe one of the best names in the business as far as defensive coordinators go. So no, I would say tackling is a strength of theirs, and I think their secondary is a strength. I really like their secondary is just solid. My only question would be the defensive line, and I caught a lot of heat here on your show after I went live. I had people in my DMs complaining about how hard I was on the defensive line. I'll admit it; they do look better than I thought they would be. I still would argue it's probably still the kind of the weakest part of the defense, but that's not a knock on them. They have played. I mean, Ridgeway has been a monster. Trey Williams, these transfers have come in and looked really good. And we're seeing that from Isaiah Nichols a little bit, a guy who Arkansas's put some weight on and developed him through fall camp, and Zach Williams, and the list just kind of goes on. And they've got depth there. So I'll admit that right now, I don't think I'm wrong that I want to see it more often. I'm like you talking about, I need more data. I need to see that this weekend against what could be a shaky Texas A&M offensive line. I want to see that this weekend. I want to see the defensive line get pressure on Calzada and disrupt what could be a troublesome run game from Texas A&M.
And Jalen Catalon is a guy that in the past game, on 2 occasions that I remember against Texas, was able to shade to one side of the field. Therefore, the quarterback did not go to that side of the field. They went to the other side of the field where he was not giving help and still had the anticipation and the moxie and then the speed to get over there and make a play on the other side of the field and break up a long pass.
He is everywhere. And if he's not picking the ball off, he's breaking the ball up or he's forcing an incompletion. And oh, by the way, he's not 6'3", right? He's 5'10", what might slow him down in the draft a little bit. But he looks like a linebacker. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Sam Aljabutu, guy that played linebacker for the Razorbacks 20 years ago. But better, faster, more athletic. Like you said, can play from sideline to sideline. He can play within that 53 yards. That's how wide the field is. He can play anywhere on the field, and he tackles. Maybe he's probably one of the better form tacklers in the SEC. Got to work on targeting, right? That's but everyone apparently needs to work on targeting. The biggest, the most confusing call in college football. But Arkansas's got to get better in that department. So that just means they're going to have to break a few more legs, Mark. That's what it means. They're going to have to, really tear up ball carriers from the hip down, apparently. But not that that's anything new to football, but yeah, he's a stud. Catalon might be the best defensive back in the SEC and one of the best safeties in the country. I really think that highly of him. I haven't seen that kind of play from a safety, I don't know, in my lifetime. And we've had some really good safeties come through here. I mean, it's not very often we have guys like that, though. I think they love comparing him around here to, and I've said it before, to Steve Atwater. That's who they compare him to, who's an NFL Hall of Famer. I'm not going that far, but he's certainly he passes the eye test for sure. He's pretty dominant for a safety.
Arkansas, Texas A&M. It should be a good one. It's been a good one, even with the Hogs down, and now Arkansas, of course, a top 15 team in the nation at 3-0. So Aggies and Hogs, the first real big test for anybody in the SEC Western Division toward seeing who's going to challenge Alabama. We also have LSU and Mississippi State getting it on Saturday as well.
Yep.
Check out. Oh, I thought
I was
you had
agreeing with
something
you.
for me, Ty.
I was agreeing with you. I'm sorry.
Check out Ty Hudson's work there at Pig Trail Network, breaking down the Hogs and Texas A&M, and catch him right after the game, as he'll have his post-game analysis right there.
Yep.
Anything we've missed, Ty?
I don't think so. I think we've covered it all, Mark.
Absolutely.
I think we've covered it all. I think we've probably made your comment section pretty mad by now. But that's okay. I mean, sometimes people don't realize, look, we don't mind doing that. I don't mind doing that. Point your anger at me. Come to the Pig Trail Network postgame show and let me know how angry you are. But yeah, it's gonna be a good game. I'm excited for it. This is it's a good test for both these teams. It really is, and it ought to be a knockout, drag out. It ought to be like what football should be.